What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another MRL format video, and this will likely be my last MRL format video for a while, as a lot of people do find the format very degenerate, and I can definitely see why. I mean, my last video showed off a pretty degenerate deck in Stall Mill, and this video is going to show off another very degenerate deck in Burn. Now, Burn gets some major tools from Magic Ruler, so I actually think that this deck is really quite exciting and plays very differently from Burn did before. But before we dive into all of that, if you're not subscribed to the channel already, please be sure to do so. We've got exciting things coming up, diving into a brand new format, which I call Treasure Format, which will introduce the limited list to really hamper the power of these hand control cards, all being at 3 copies. So that should be very exciting, as I know that a lot of people don't really like MRL format because it's just so low resources and top deck reliant because there's so many hand drip cards running around. So if you like the card pool but you don't like all these things being unlimited, then Treasure format might be the format for you. So look forward to that. That should be coming very soon. In addition, if you're interested in trying out that format or this format or any of the other formats that I've covered, we have a Discord server now, so please be sure to join that. Link will be in the description down below. It's a really great place to find games in these formats and also just theory craft and test with other people. So be sure to join. And lastly, if you enjoy this video, please be sure to give it a like. It really helps out the channel quite a bit. With all that out of the way, though, let's dive in to Burn. Now, Stall Burn in the past has sort of played relying on things like Tremendous Fire or Okazi, in addition to things like Cannon Soldier, to sort of just make last-minute offensive pushes with a ton of burn spells. And this format sort of introduces some different tools that change the style of play a little bit. And the foremost among these tools is Chain Energy. Now, Chain Energy is a very degenerate continuous spell. It says each player must pay 500 life points per card to normal summon, special summon, set, or activate cards from his or her respective hand. Now, this can be devastating, especially if you're able to actually stack multiple Chain Energies on top of each other, causing players to have to pay 1,000 life points or even more to play cards from their hand. This can make it so that your opponent's actions are very, very limited, and if you have removal or negation for whatever they do, then they're going to be even more out of luck and have to dig themselves deeper into the life point hole to actually get something done. In addition, we're playing other burn spells as well that can give them a tough time. We're playing 2 Toll, which is a similar sort of card to Change Energy as it limits their actions, but it is easier to play around. Toll says that each player must pay 500 life points to declare an attack. I'm honestly very iffy on this card, which is why we only have it at 2 and not at more. I think it can be very useful at slowing down the game a bit more to draw into more of your combo pieces, as your opponent won't be incentivized to attack while it's on the field. But at the same time, I think it doesn't really do as much as just a more typical burn spell might do. So maybe in future iterations of the deck, we can bring this out in favor of something better. But for now, we've got it in, and it can come up, so it's not terrible here. In addition, we're also playing 3 Giant Germ. Now, this is a monster out of Magic Ruler that is very useful in this deck. When it's destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, it inflicts 500 damage to your opponent, and then it special summons out any number of Giant Germs from your deck. So this can represent 1500 damage at a time if your opponent is going to attack through all of them. And if they don't, then it can bait out removal, which can also be good. Similarly to Giant Germ, we've also got 3 Nimble Manga, which can serve a purpose of swarming your field with monsters that can be tough for your opponent to get through, and also deck thinning quite a bit. Nimble Manga is basically like Giant Germ, but instead of special summoning out its additional copies in attack, it special summons them out in face down defense, and instead of inflicting damage to your opponent, it increases your life points by 1,000, which can be very useful at giving you more energy to pay for Chain Energy. So these cards all synergize extremely, extremely well and can be very devastating for your opponent to play through. In addition to these new tools for Burn, we're also playing Cannon Soldier, which is a much older tool, but a very, very useful tool. You can use this to tribute away a field of something like Nimble Manga, which can be very nice. It can also just be used as a late game push to finish off the last of your opponent's remaining life points, which can make it very, very useful. We're also playing an older burn tool in Just Desserts, which is a trap card that inflicts 500 damage to your opponent for each monster that they control, and this may not be too impressive on its own, But if you're able to stack this up, it can really force your opponent into some very tight conditions, as they won't want to commit more than a couple monsters to field, and that can prevent them from being able to get aggressive, which can make it easier for you. And if they do commit more monsters to field, then you can get a ton of damage in all at once. So this card's just very, very good. It can also be chained to Heavy Storm, which is very, very nice. For the non-burn tools, we're playing some very, very generically good cards. We're playing 3 Mystic Tomato, as it's a way to get in for damage if you manage to clear your opponent's field. And also it can bring out things like Giant Germ or things like Cannon Soldier, or bring out any one of your recruiters. We are playing 2 Sangan and 2 Witch of the Black Forest, as these search out pretty much anything in your deck and are very, very strong for doing that. Lastly, we're also playing 3 Spear Cretin. This is to sort of stall a bit better. If you manage to get these Spear Cretin loops set up, it can be very nice, and can also play into a Just Desserts potentially. But it also can bring back things like Nimble Manga to gain you 1,000 more life points. It can bring back Cannon Soldier to burn your opponent for more life points. It's just a very flexible card in this deck, and a very good card to stall your opponent even further. It can backfire if your opponent has a Magician of Faith engraved, and they're able to get back something like Heavy Storm. That's of course very bad, but you can try and play around this a little bit. And so I think its benefits do outweigh its detriments. Now, you may notice that we're not actually playing Cyberjar in this deck, and that may be surprising to you, as Cyberjar is a great way to clear your opponent's offensive pressure and sort of set up your field again. However, Cyberjar doesn't really play well with things like Chain Energy, as it manages to summon your opponent's monsters directly to their field, which will then not cause them to take life point damage from the Chain Energy, and also can allow your opponent to draw into more spell and trap removal. So that's why we're not playing it, even though it does pair well with something like Spear Cretin and can be very strong on its own. Moving on to the spells, we of course have the Power 5 limited spells, Change of Heart, Dark Hole, Pot of Greed, Raigeki, and Monster Reborn, as this deck does sort of want to be able to get in damage where it can. So we are playing all 5 of these, and I think they're all pretty strong in this deck. We are also playing 3 Giant Trunade as sort of our spell and trap removal of choice, but the main reason we have this here is because if your opponent had spent a ton of life points setting their back row, you can Giant Trunade to get it back into hand and make them repay for it if you've got Chain Energy. It can also enable you to make big plays where you might not want to pay a lot of life points with Chain Energy on field. If you have a Giant Trunade already set or in your hand, you can activate it, bounce the Chain Energies back to hand, make your big plays without having to pay life points, and then reset the Chain Energies for your opponent's turn. So Giant Trunade, I think, is very, very nice in this deck. We also have 3 Forceful Sentry, and the reason for this is we don't really want to play something like Confiscation or Duo, as that costs us 1,000 life points. So Forceful Sentry is a good tool at sort of looking at our opponent's hand, getting that hand knowledge, and being able to play around it, while also being able to send back things that can really cause us trouble, like Heavy Storms or Mystical Space Typhoons. So it's very good in that respect, which is why we're playing this over the other 2 hand rips. And lastly, for the remaining traps, we have 3 Magic Jammer, as you really do want to stop your opponent's spell and trap removal. This can be a bit tough to use in this format, given all the hand rips at your opponent's disposal, so you might not have many cards in hand to actually use with this, but I think it is better to have it than to not have it. And it's better to use than something like Solemn Judgment, which can really back you into a corner when you're playing things like Chain Energy. So I like Magic Jammer in this deck over Solemn. I think maybe you could experiment with changing this up a bit, but I like it here. And lastly, we have a Mirror Force, which is very good at clearing your opponent's field to potentially enable you to attack in afterwards. It's also great at then forcing your opponent to commit more monsters to board, which plays into something like Chain Energy. So that is the main deck. For the side deck, I'm a bit more iffy on it. We are largely trying to side to prepare for like the mill and burn matchups, as I think that the deck is already decently well equipped against the generic good stuff deck. So we're playing some more Cannon Soldiers as well as an Okazi and 3 Tremendous Fire in case we are up against like the mill matchup and we need to get more burn on field before they can actually deck us out. You could also potentially play Minars for that purpose as well, as Minar is a monster that can potentially deal 3,000 points of damage to your opponent if they manage to force you to discard all 3 of it in a card destruction play. So that could just kill them out of nowhere. But for now, we've got these, and maybe with more experimentation and refinement, this will change, but this is what I'm going with for now. We also have 3 Man-Eater Bug, which can be good if we need a bit more removal. 3 Solemn Judgment if our opponent is playing a deck with a ton of counter traps. This can be decent for that. It can be very risky as you are cutting your life points down by half while playing Chain Energy in the deck. So it's kind of debatable whether you want to bring this in, but I do think it's good. And I also do think it matches up well in the burn matchup, which is surprising to say. But if your opponent's going to activate something like a Just Desert to deal the last bit of damage to you, then you'd prefer to take half your life points than your whole life points with Solemn Judgment. So this can be good for that purpose. And lastly, we've got 3 Wuboku. If our opponent is on a bit more of an aggressive deck, this can be good to bring in just to add a bit more defensive options. It can also be chained to something like Heavy Storm, which is very nice. For the Fusion deck, you should probably have a Fusion deck here for the Mind Games, but we don't. It doesn't really matter. No deck in this format is really playing Fusion except for extremely jank decks, and so it won't really matter in most cases. But that is going to do it for the deck breakdown. But I think to really show off what this deck can do, we need to play some games with it. So let's dive into those. Okay, we've got a game against Declan here, who is a first-time appearance on this channel, I believe, but they are active in the Discord. We are playing the burn deck. Unclear what they're playing, but let's find out. We are going to try and win rock, paper, scissors, but it is an intense battle. Luckily, we do manage to pull it out. So we will be able to go first, which will be very good if we can get some initial chain energies on field to start. That'll be very nice. Let's see if we're able to do that, though. And we do draw chain energy. That can be one of the big flaws of this deck. If you don't draw into things like chain energy early, then you can really struggle to get in some initial damage before your opponent's able to set up their board. But we drew chain energy, and we drew Giant Trunade, and we drew Forceful Sentry. So this is a very powerful hand right here. And we're just going to activate Forceful Sentry to see what we're dealing with right away. And it looks like they don't really have any ways to deal with spell and trap removal at this point. I guess Painful Choice can kind of do it. But if they do send like all 5 of their spell and trap removal options to the graveyard, then we're feeling very fine about that, as then we don't have to play around spell and trap removal after they get that out of the way. So I think the main thing we're worried about here is actually Cyberjar, as we don't want them drawing deeper into their deck. So we are going to actually send back the Jar and just hope to play around the spell and trap removal that they get off of the Painful Choice. We can make it so that they don't get a Heavy Storm at least, so we can feel fine setting a bunch of our back row here. Unless they draw Heavy Storm off the top, which is a consideration. If they do that, then we are kind of screwed because, you know, we've committed so much to board and we don't really have any other ways to deal much burn damage besides what we got here. They are going to Painful here, and they will take 500 for that. And it looks like they're just going to send a bunch of hand rips instead of prioritizing the spell and trap removal. So we're feeling pretty good about that. We're going to give them a Comfy because, you know, either way they're going to discard cards from our hand. And this way they take 1,000 for doing so. They're going to bring out a Mystic Tomato, and they will be taking 1,000 life points here from the Mystic Tomato and from the Painful Choice. They are going to attack into our set first, just in case it is a recruiter, and it is. So they will be able to discard something off the Comfy here. We're just going to grab a Mystic Tomato and give them no choice in the matter here. So they're going to activate Comfy, pay 1,000, and pay 500 on top of that. And they are going to discard one of our Mystic Tomatoes. They know we've got another, but honestly, we're not too worried about that. And we draw another Chain Energy, so that is pretty nice. We are going to pay 500, set this Mystic Tomato here, and then we're going to pay an additional 500 to activate Chain Energy. So now every activation, set, whatever you have from their hand, it will be 1,000 life points here, which is pretty brutal here. So they're just going to set one and pay 1,000 because it does stack, and they will just pass to us because they know it's a Mystic Tomato, so there's no real point in attacking here. We draw a Spear Cretin, which is actually incredibly good. We are going to think a bit because we know that they do have the bug, so it's likely that they do have that bug in hand. So we could pay 1,000 just to set Spear Cretin. We could Trinate away the board so that way we don't have to pay the 1,000. But I think we're at enough of a life point total that we can afford to take 1,000. So I think we are just going to go for setting... Oh, no, okay. I guess we're going to Trinate instead. kind of iffy. Oh, they're going to chain Waboku. So actually that works out pretty well for us, as we can get everything back to hand. We don't really care about them being able to keep their monsters on field this turn. We're just going to attack into that Mystic Tomato and get out a Sangan. This will enable us to search or to pop their bug, or have the bug pop us. So we will be able to get a search here. I'm really glad that my past self saw this line, because it's a really cool line, knowing that they had the Waboku and getting them to use that up while also being able to get a recruiter pop is really nice. Now we've got the germ to deal 1500 more damage, and we've got the chain energies costing them 1000 life points per activation. We also have just desserts here, which currently can deal 1000 life points as well. So we're in a very, very good position here. Main 2, we are going to set the germ, set the desserts and a chain energy, and then activate chain energy. It's very important when playing this deck that you order chain energy activations correctly when you do have multiple chain energies in hand. You want to set the first chain energy that you're playing and then activate the next one, so that way when you activate the second chain energy, it's already on field and you don't have to take life point damage from it. So a minor sort of ordering thing, but it is very important. And so I'm glad that I managed to show that here. They are just going to attack into our set. It is the germ, so that means that they are going to take 500 from that, and we do manage to get 2 more germs from deck here. They're just going to pass back to us, and we draw a True Nade. So this is around the point in the game where we start to consider, can we kill our opponent here, or at least force them to not be able to activate anything from hand with our chain energies. So if we crash both of our giant germs into the tomatoes, then they'll take 1000 damage, dropping them down to 2500. With the just desserts on top of that, that will drop them down to 1500, which doesn't quite get them out of chain energy range. It may still be good enough though, so that's what we have to consider here. Whether we want to make this sort of aggressive push, drop them down to a point where they only really have 1 activation left, and if we manage to get anything else to sort of deal that remaining 500 damage to them, then they're just dead. So we're going to think about it, and we're not going to go for that. We're just going to set the Spear Cretin here, switch our germs to defense, and pass back to them. And as a note, since they asked this question in the chat, things like Giant Germ and the manga don't actually trigger Chain Energy because they summon from deck and not from hand. And Chain Energy only deals damage when you play cards from hand, so it's a neat little synergy that this deck has. They're just going to set another and take 1000 there. We are going to activate Just Desserts to make it so that now they cannot actually play any more cards from hand. And I think we do just win the game here, because we can just switch the germs to attack and crash into the Mystic Tomato if they leave it in attack next turn. It looks like they are going to leave it in attack, and it's just a Spear Cretin, so we'll get back a Sangan. And they're just going to pass turn. Now, if they had switched the Mystic Tomato, they would have survived for a bit longer, but I think that the writing was kind of on the wall here, as there's nothing that they could really do here to prevent taking 1000 damage at some point. And we draw Just Desserts, so that is just the end of the game, even if they had switched the tomato to defense. We're going to crash our germs into the tomatoes there, and that will just be the end of the game. So I think that game does a really good job of showing how powerful Burn can be in game 1, especially if you draw chain energies early. One of the biggest flaws in this deck is that there's no real way to search out chain energy, and chain energy is your most powerful card. And if you don't draw, it can be really tough late in the game to sort of whittle your opponent down further. So we did get very lucky drawing the chain energy early there, but I'm glad we did, because now I was able to show off how strong the deck can be when you do draw it early. Game 2, I don't think we really side into anything, as it seems like they're on a standard sort of good stuff deck. So I feel fine just doing this, and we're just going to go into Game 3 and see what happens here. So we are going to go second, and we don't draw Chain Energy first. We do draw a Forceful Sentry. I guess we could have potentially sided out the Forceful Sentries as we were going second, but I think it is very good just to get rid of spell and trap removal, so I'm fine with the Forceful Sentry in the deck in Game 2. They're going to Pot of Greed. Very unfortunate. They're going to Confiscation here, so they will be able to see our hand, and they are going to send the Forceful Sentry. At the very least, it served as hand rip bait, so not the worst thing in the world. They're going to activate a duo, kind of unfortunate here, and they do snipe Change of Heart, which is a very powerful card. We are going to actually discard the Mystic Tomato, as the Germ and the Mamanga can help us deck thin, as well as preventing any major aggressive pushes on our opponent's part. Now, as a note, one of the reasons why I think Burn is in a potentially better place in this format than it might be in other formats is because 2 of the hand rip cards do cost 1,000 life points. And many people are playing Duo and Comfy. Maybe not in the same deck, but they're probably playing at least one. So that gives them like 3 or maybe 4 cards in their deck that are likely costing them 1,000 damage to use each, which Burn can capitalize on. So we'll see if we're actually able to convert that into advantage later on in the game. We may not have drawn Chain Energy in the first 5 cards, but we did just draw Chain Energy there, which is very nice. We're going to set the Giant Germ, activate the Chain Energy, pass back to them. If they've got Spell and Trap removed for this, that's kind of unfortunate, but this is really the only play we've got since they decimated our hand a bit. They're going to activate Tribute to the Doomed, a very good side deck card against a strategy like Burn or Mill. So that is quite unfortunate. They are also going to flip up Mass Sorcerer, summon out Witch, and they are going to get in here for 2,000 and a draw. So now they've really equalized the life point total here a bit. Main 2, they're just going to pass back to us. So what we can actually do here is summon out Nimamanga and attack, and just attack into their Mass Sorcerer. This way, if they have another Tribute to the Doomed, you know, at least they aren't going to get a draw in here. So they're going to take 100, and we're just going to pass back to them. There's no reason to set the Magic Jammer, as we've got no cards in hand, and if they do draw a heavy, we don't want to lose the Magic Jammer for nothing. They are going to pay 5, summon out a Cannon Soldier, and Change of Heart our Mamanga, and this might just be the end of the game. Let's see, that's 2135, and then Cannon Soldier contribute away the board for 15, dropping us down to 500, which means that we won't be able to actually activate cards from hand here. So, kind of unfortunate. If they do see the line to tribute away their entire field, we do just lose here. Main 2, they're going to tribute away the Mamanga, and it looks like they're going to pass back to us, so good thing that they didn't see the line here. Unfortunately, Forceful Sentry will not allow us to get out of the situation either way, so that will just be the end of the game. So, this can kind of show how the Chain Energies can be a double-edged sword. If they had tributed away their entire field, we wouldn't have been able to do anything, even if we did draw a powerful card off the top. So, you gotta always be careful with the Chain Energies. And if you're not able to keep your life points up, they can easily hurt you just as much as the opponent. So, kind of unfortunate there. Hopefully going first here in Game 3 will help us avoid what happened in Game 2 with the hand rips, but only time will tell. For Game 3, I think we might have sided out of the toll, actually, because I wanted to bring in, like, Man-Eater Bugs or something that could be a bit more useful here. So, we'll see if I actually did that or not. I might have kept in the tolls. But I really don't think the card does much, especially games 2 and 3 when they've got probably a fair amount of spell and trap removal. We do draw a Forceful Sentry here, so we are just going to activate it, see their hand, and see what they got. They've got 2 painful choices, a Snatch Steal, a Cyber Jar, and a Mirror Force. This is very interesting. I think what we want to do is take the Cyber Jar, as taking a painful choice doesn't do anything because they've just got another. And we can sort of play around that a bit by, you know, setting our hand if they do go for hand rips. We don't really care about the Mirror Force of the Snatch Steal that much. And I think the Cyber Jar can draw them into more cards, which we really don't want. So I think we are going to take the Jar and then just, you know, play around what else they've got. So we are just going to set the Germ, set a Trunade, set a Raigeki, pass back to them. They are likely going to do this probably for Spell and Trap removal or a hand rip, one of the two. We don't have a Chain Energy active, so it might not be as worth for them to get Spell and Trap removal here. But we'll see. They are going to send Duo, Comfy, Duo, Forceful, and one more, Duo. So since Duo depletes our entire hand, we probably want to give them the Comfy, as that does cost them 1,000 life points here. So we're going to give them a Comfy. They're going to send the remaining hand rips to grave here, and they are going to activate the Comfy. So they're going to see our hand, and I don't know what the pick here is for them. You know, if they send the Cannon, we can get it back with Spear Cretin, but Cannon is just a very individually powerful card. I guess less so when they've got Snatch Steal, but I don't know. It's kind of a tough choice. They are going to take the Cannon, and I think that makes sense. They're going to set one, set another, pass back to us. Kind of unfortunate to see that they drew a monster here, but nothing we can really do about that. We're just going to set the Spear Cretans, set the Waboku, pass back to them. They do know that we have these Spear Cretans set, so maybe if they've got like a Man-Eater Bug, this will force them to target that. If they've got a Magician of Faith, this plays around them getting back like a Coffee or something. But it doesn't really play around them sort of painful choicing, sending a Heavy Storm and then getting it back with Magician of Faith. So, you know, we don't have the best options here. We just gotta hope that they don't really have much here. They are going to pop our first set with the Man-Eater Bug, and they will activate a Tribute to the Doomed, clearing our remaining set. So this is quite unfortunate for us. We do know there are two remaining cards. It's a Mirror Force and a Snatch Steal, but we don't really have anything to do here. So we just got to hope we draw something good, and that is something very good. We draw Pot of Greed. We're just going to activate it, and we get two majorly good ones here. We're just going to summon out the Sangan and attack into the Bug. If they use Mirror Force on this, we're completely fine with that. If they don't, and then they Snatch Steal it, we're also completely fine with that. Looks like they're not going to do it, which is smart. You know, no real point to Mirror Forcing a Sangan here. And they're just going to set another pass back to us. We're just going to keep trying to get in damage, I think. We're going to attack in with the Sangan yet again. They're going to take another 1,000. We're going to set the Magic Jammer pass back to us. We need to keep the Momonga in hand for the Magic Jammer. Unfortunately, you know, we'd like to get the Momonga on field to potentially get the 1,000 in, but unfortunately, we might have to discard it. They're just going to set another summon a Witch. And they're just going to attack into our Sangan here. And that is fine by us. We're going to take 100, but we can potentially get a pretty good search here. We're going to grab a Mystic Tomato as we feel that, you know, this way we can potentially hit over the Witch. It can also just serve as a defensive option against the Witch. We know that they do have a Mirror Force, though, so that complicates things a little bit. So instead of just, you know, bringing out the Mystic Tomato and attacking, we are just going to set the Momonga instead. And they're just going to attack into our set here. It is the Momonga, so we will gain 1,000 and be able to bring out 2 more Momonga to the field. We're in a pretty good position as this is pretty tough for them to clear. If they do have a board clear like Raigeki or Darkhold, then we do have the Magic Jammer for that. Looks like they're going to set one pass back to us. We draw a Sangan. We're just going to True Nade the board away. And I guess we're doing this so that way we can Raigeki as well, maybe? In case they've got like a counter trap or something. Looks like we are indeed going to Raigeki, and we're very glad we did that because we did manage to hit a Cyber Jar there. So they're going to search their deck, see what they've got off the Witch, and this is kind of tough for them. You know, we did misplay flipping up the Momongas, or not misplay, but we did misorder things. They technically should have gotten the search right when we activated the Raigeki, so they still wouldn't know that we were going aggressive here with the Momongas, potentially. I mean, I think they could have figured it out, but we are just going to switch those to attack, summon out the Mystic Tomato, and try and get in for a ton of damage here. And we do. So they're going to drop down to 2,050, and if we draw some of our more powerful burn spells, then this could just be the end of the game. We're going to set double Magic Jammer and pass back to them because we think that we're in a pretty good game state here. So we're not too worried. They're going to heavy, we're going to Magic Jammer, discarding a Waboku. They're going to set one, set another, set another, set another, and pass back to us. We draw Chain Energy, which is pretty great. We're going to summon out these Sangan and just try and get in here for damage. They are likely going to Mirror Force this, but if they do, we get a search off the Sangan, so we don't really care too much. And it looks like they are going to do that. We're going to grab another Mystic Tomato here, and main 2, we're just going to activate Chain Energy. They're going to Solemn the Chain Energy, which I think actually does make some sense here. They're going to drop down to 1,025, though, which is very worrying, as, you know, we do have cards in our deck that can potentially deal that damage very easily. They are going to think about this for a bit, and they are going to activate Monster Reborn, and they're going to bring out... Unclear what they're going to bring out yet, but we'll see. They're going to bring out a Witch. Okay, that makes sense. If we've got like a Mirror Force as our last remaining set, then this way they at least get searches. But they're going to just clear our Momongas, which is fine by us as we get up to a really high life point total here. So 10,450. That's very good. We are just going to set the Mystic Tomato, pass back to them. They can't clear this with their Witches. And if they do summon out a monster to clear it, we can just bring out another tomato potentially. they're going to Pot of Greed, and we're going to think about whether we want to actually Magic Jammer this and keep them on very low resources. I think we just let that go through because, you know, we want to save our Magic Jammer for more impactful spells, I guess, but I think there was a very good argument there for actually Magic Jammering to prevent them from getting 2 more cards that could potentially claw them back into this game. But, you know, we're at such a high life point value that we're not too worried about this. They're going to bring out a Mass Sorcerer and attack into our Mystic Tomato here. They can't clear it with the 1100 defense, so we're perfectly fine with that. They are going to Snap Steal the Tomato and pass back to us. We do gain 1,000 here, but I think we just do have the game pretty much on lock here. We're going to activate Trunade, switch the Mystic Tomato to attack, and attack in to the Mass Sorcerer here. They're going to take 500, dropping them down to 525. And then we are actually going to activate Chain Energy, as if they do activate a card to clear this, then they'll drop down to 25 life points, which is very easy to kill them through. If they don't, then they can't play anything else, and we can just pick apart their board with the Mystic Tomato over the coming turns. So we're feeling in a very good position here. And they are going to activate Tribute to the Doomed, paying their last 500 life points, and just hoping that we don't have a monster in time. But this is a very risky play, and if we draw any monster that can get over the witches, then we're feeling pretty good. We draw Mirror Force, which is basically just as good. So we're going to set that pass back to them. They're just going to attack in here, and we do have the Mirror Force, so that will effectively be the end of the game. Now, they could have potentially played around Mirror Force by switching Witch to defense, but I think even if they did that, you know, this was ultimately a losing battle. We had the Chain Energy on field. They didn't have enough life points to clear it, and we had plenty of cards in our deck that could have potentially dealt that last 25 points of damage. So I think that, you know, they did the best that they could here in the end, but ultimately the burn deck was able to overpower them with this late Chain Energy activation. And I think that this third game shows what you have to do when you don't draw Chain Energy early. And oftentimes that does entail attacking in with a bunch of weaker monsters. I think that the Momongas and Giant Germs are very good at deck thinning and getting bodies on field to potentially let you make those big aggressive pushes. And so I think you should take advantage of that when you can. But I hope these games really show off how controlling burn can be in this format. Chain Energy is such a degenerate card, and it can really force your opponent into very tricky situations. And it can be very, very hard to deal with, especially game 1 when you don't necessarily have as much spell and trap removal in the deck. So I think that this deck is quite good this format, and it might not be the best deck in the world. I've played plenty of games with it where, you know, you don't draw the right pieces and the game just goes downhill real quick and you can't recover. But I've also played a lot of games where it does turn out like this. So is it the best deck in the format? No. Is it very good? I'd say yes. But that is the last deck that I'm planning on covering in MRL format for now. There were some other decks that I experimented with, but, you know, I didn't think that they really did well enough to merit inclusion in this coverage. If y'all disagree and want me to show off another deck, then please let me know down in the comments below. Or if you just want me to show off this format more, let me know as well. I've sort of been speeding along to the next format, which is Treasure format, as I think that there are a lot more jank strategies in that can be more viable than they are in a format with 9 hand rips. But I know that a lot of people really do like this MRL format. They really find it very unique, and I do as well. I think it's a really fun format. And so if you all would like me to spend more time in it, I definitely can. But that's a discussion for the comments down below, and I look forward to reading those comments. If people largely just want me to move on to the next format, then my next video will likely be a tier list for MRL format. It won't be as complete as some of the tier lists for my other formats, but I think we'll cover most of the major players that we've found through testing in the Discord. Then after that, we'll be diving headfirst into Treasure format, which is quite similar to MRL format, but, you know, limiting the hand rips does make jank a lot more viable. So we're going to have a fun time discussing things like rituals, tunes, and all the other sort of fun jank strategies that Magic Ruler introduced that just aren't quite up to snuff in this format here. But until then, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.